Hello, my name is Sheri Kling, and on this Deeper Rhythm channel, I talk about dreams, spirituality, and transformation, and about how to listen to the deeper rhythm of your own life, and to be in the flow of the sacred source of all life. Now, if you like this content, please like, subscribe, and share this video. And when you subscribe, hit that little bell on the notifications so that you see whenever I've posted new videos. So the question that we're exploring today is, can we experience a sacred presence? Now, I've been reading a new book by the author Caroline Myss called Intimate Conversations with the Divine, which is really about prayers and her own prayer life. And so it's made up of short essays, and I kind of have been trying to read one every morning. And so the other day I was reading an essay called Sharing Blessings. And in that essay, she asks the question, what exactly is the feeling of a blessing? She then describes her own experiences of feeling what she calls holy companionship. And that led me to think about, when in my own life have I felt that kind of sacred presence? So one experience that I had happened quite a long time ago. It was in the early 90s, and I was in a relationship with a man that I had met. And when we entered into being in relationship with each other, we kind of we had both been wounded in our immediate past, and so we wanted to kind of step slowly into being in relationship again and kind of just put our toe in the water. So we kind of wanted, and both talked about wanting to approach being in relationship kind of slowly. But what in fact happened was that we were colliding around the wounds that we had. And what I mean by that is the very places where he was most wounded and most tender and then most guarded were the places exactly the opposite of which I was the most wounded and the most tender and the most guarded. And so things that I did because I was guarding this area, bumped right up against places in him that he was guarding and feeling vulnerable around. And so that was like a collision that really made our being in relationship really difficult and really impossible. And so at one point, we hadn't even been in relationship that long, but he came to me and said that he wanted to be in relationship with someone else, that he had met someone else that he wanted to be in relationship with. And that broke my heart. I mean, I was very, very sad. And this happened right before we were supposed to take a trip for the weekend to go down to Florida. I was in Georgia at the time, and we were going to go down to Florida and visit some of my best friends. And so it was right before that trip that this happened. And so the night before we were supposed to go on the trip, we decided to get together and have a conversation. And in that conversation, we were more honest and vulnerable to each other than we had ever been able to be before. And so ironically, as we were breaking up, we actually were closer than we'd ever been. And that didn't change what was happening, but it was really impactful for both of us. And so the next day, I left on my trip. I decided to go anyway on this trip to Florida. And so I left. But I was very, very brokenhearted. And so as I was driving, I was like weeping in the car and crying and, just so brokenhearted. And as I was just in this place of mourning and weeping, I suddenly thought of I mean, as a person who grew up in the church, I guess it's not surprising. But I started reflecting on Jesus' crucifixion and how it was when he was at his least powerful and most vulnerable, even to the point of being willing to give up his own life, that he was actually his most powerful. This is the power of religious stories, is that they touch on something that is deeply true, regardless of whether or not the details of the story are historically factual, right? So I was reflecting on that story and how wasn't it amazing that at this most vulnerable time was when Jesus was actually his most powerful self. And so I suddenly felt a presence next to me in my car. Now, I've never felt that before. I mean, there was nobody sitting next to me in my car. I was alone. There was no body in the seat next to me. But it felt as if there was another presence in the car. To me, I kind of said felt like the Holy Spirit. That's what I named that presence. But that was just what I named it. I don't know what the presence was. I just know it was holy and it was sacred. And it brought me a deep, deep sense of peace. And that feeling of peacefulness lasted the entire weekend. Whereas I normally would have been suffering through that whole weekend, having just had this breakup experience, I was actually at a place of the most peacefulness I'd probably ever been at. So that's one story. Another story now goes back really to my childhood and to when I was about 12 years old. And at that age, we had a dog, a dog named Cuddles. My good friends will remember Cuddles very well. And Cuddles and I, after dinner in the evenings, I might have been 12 or 13, I used to take her for walks after dinner. And the thing that I loved to do most was to go a couple of blocks away from where I grew up, and where there was a little creek and there was a fence, because there was a golf course on the other side of the fence. So of course there was a fence around the golf course, but there was a hole in the fence in this one spot. And so I used to take Cuddles and we would walk over, cross the creek, and go up on the other side and go through this hole in the fence and go and be in the golf course and play in the golf course. And I used to take my shoes off because, the grass in a golf course is like a velvet carpet. And so we used to walk around and just enjoy that place. And I would let the dog off the leash and we would run around, and I would always have to keep my eyes open for any groundskeepers because, we would obviously be in trouble for being in the golf course when we weren't supposed to be. And so if we saw a groundskeeper, we would dive under the trees. And one evening we saw some groundskeepers in the distance. And so we dove under a grove of pine trees, and it was, there was like a secret room kind of underneath those trees that was cut off from everything else. And so we dove in there, and I was sitting in the center of this little room and looked up in a tree and saw a barn owl. And it was a magical, magical moment. Another story that I think of is a time when I was in North Carolina attending a music conference that I used to go to that was like a week-long songwriters event, and called the Swannanoa Gathering. And so this particular year that I was there, it was again another breakup time. I had been, well, not really a breakup, but I was basically had been, in a relationship with a man that I was deeply in love with. And though he had deep feelings for me, it wasn't the same. He didn't love me in return in the way that I hoped to be loved. And so it had become really clear in a phone conversation we had had that wasn't going to go the direction that I wanted it to go. And so I took my journal and I was sitting outside of a building on this college campus where this event happened, and sitting on the bank of like kind of a little place where the land kind of went down in a little valley, and there were some trees below me, and it was just a real pretty spot. And so I was journaling there, writing about this relationship and how I felt about this relationship. And again, I was crying. It sounds like all I do is cry, but that's not true. But in this case, I was crying because, again, I was very heartbroken. And as I was sitting there in that state of just really deep pain, I kind of said aloud, God, I need a nature moment. Give me a nature moment. And I opened my eyes and looked, and in the tree in front of me, all of a sudden, like 100 goldfinches landed in the tree and just exploded in a cacophony of gold that was gorgeous. Those moments are what psychologist Carl Jung used to call synchronicities, and we use that term a lot now. Basically, what that means is it's when there's a meaningful coincidence, meaning when something in the outer world connects to something in our inner world through meaning. So those are some stories of when it has felt to me like I have been in the presence of something sacred. And right now, I am kind of struggling myself because I don't always feel what I want to feel inside in terms of my own connection to the sacred. What I want is to have my heart, strangely warmed like John Wesley, or to experience what Thomas Merton did at the corner of 4th and Walnut in Louisville, Kentucky, when he looked around him at the passersby and saw that they were all shining like the sun, right? That's what I want to feel. But I'm not feeling that right now. So what do we do when it's dry? When we don't feel like we're in the flow of any kind of sacred source? So my first answer to that question is that asking what we do when it's dry reminds me of a wonderful song by a songwriter named David Wilcox called All the Roots Grow Deeper When It's Dry. And I'll put a link to a video of the song in the description below. So we're in the season of fall right now in the U.S., just at the end of that season, really. And we've watched, all these gorgeous leaves in their bright colors fall off the trees, leaving things bare and stark and colder. And so in his song, David sings in the chorus, "Prosperity will have its seasons. Even when it's here, it's going by. And when it's gone, we pretend we know the reasons. And all the roots grow deeper when it's dry." So in dry seasons, I ask myself, can I trust that right now my roots are growing deeper and stronger while I wait for the flow to begin again? And the second thing I'd say about dry times is that it's during those times that we need to remember our past experiences and the experiences of others, and hold on to those as having shown us something useful and helpful. This is one purpose of religion, actually, is that we have these stories from the past, stories from our ancestors to lean into about how people encountered the sacred presence in their own lives. And that's why I think we're missing something huge right now in our own journeys when we don't talk about spiritual experiences or the sacred in our secular societies. So yes, I think we can, I know we can experience a sacred presence. So if you would like to dive deeper with me into a meditation to open yourself up to this sacred presence, then I invite you to click on the link below in the description to go to another video where I will take us through a meditation about experiencing a sacred presence. And also below is a link to register for one of my upcoming Dream Divina workshops, which are contemplative workshops where we experience a dream in a contemplative way and explore its deepest meanings. There's also a link where you can reach out to me if you're interested in working with me one-on-one to discover more about your dreams or your spiritual journey and transformation. And you can also find a link below to become a patron of this channel and my work, which I greatly appreciate. So until next time, may your dreams be fruitful and your journey be joyful.